to start off with just a quick overview of BIOPAMA. Just want to share the screen quickly. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So just an overview of the webinar. As I said, I'm going to give a very brief introduction. Then I'm going to hand over to Steve Padell from the EU Joint Research Centre to give a brief introduction on the JRC. And then Andrew Cottam will give us a demonstration of the new BIOPAMA Reference Information System and how that works, how you can use it, how you can upload information and what you can get from it. And then Bastian Bertsky from the JRC will give us a short session on how to add content. First basic steps, and the idea is that we're going to build on this every time with the webinars and add more detail, and then we'll have a Q&A. But please feel free, if you have any questions during the webinar, to also add them to the chat. If they're for a specific person, you can direct it to them, or otherwise generally, and we can handle those in the Q&A session. So just quickly, BIOPAMA, the Biodiversity in Protected Areas Management Program, is an initiative of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States and financed by the European Union's 11th European Development Fund. And there are two implementing partners. So there's IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, because of global protected areas and biodiversity expertise. And then we have the EU Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. So they are partners in terms of the scientific and technical expertise, which is the focus of this webinar, is the data and technical side of BIOPAMA. So the aim is to support the ACP countries to achieve, monitor and report on their global biodiversity commitments and targets. So it really is to support data collection, analysis, reporting, and how can we support countries to measure targets, to have indicators that they can assess progress towards all these commitments that are already in place. So BIOPAMA started in, the second phase of BIOPAMA started in 2017 and runs till 2023. And the overall objective is to contribute to improving the long-term conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and natural resources in protected areas and surrounding communities. So it covers protected and conserved areas through better use and monitoring of information and capacity development on management and governance. So as you'll see from that, the focus is on management effectiveness and governance and equity, but also covering all conserved areas. Just a quick overview of ESARO, so the Eastern Southern African Regional Office for IUCN. We cover 24 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, including the Indian Ocean Islands. So the whole ESARO BIOPAMA program is a regional program looking at projects across the 24 countries. Just a very brief overview of how BIOPAMA, the structure of the program, so it provides tailored support to actors to address priorities for management effectiveness and governance. So you'll see there's quite a lot of overlap between governance, equity and management effectiveness. Landscape planning fits into both of those. So we try and look at those specific areas through three different mechanisms. The first one being the regional observatories and information systems. So that is what the focus of this webinar is on, is how can you use these tools. In our region, we have gone with the term Regional Resource Hub to use it as a hub where you can come and access resources, you can load resources, but you can also have capacity building. And the information systems related to that, I'll give you some more information on that shortly. Then also through capacity building, so how do you use all these tools, these systems to have better governance, equity and management effectiveness. And then through the action component, which is our grant-making mechanism, which we will also be doing a webinar on in the coming months. So just an overview of this reference information system. So the one we're going to be presenting on today is the top layer, the BIOPAMA Reference Information System, which is a global level, and Andrew and Steve will give you more information on that. And then we will have our Regional Resource Hub based here in Eastern and Southern Africa, which, as many of you would have seen, we did an expression of interest, and the Regional Centre for the Mapping of Resources for Development was chosen as our preferred host. And on the line, we do also have Ngugi Kimani, who is from RCMRD, and we will be working very closely with them to develop this Regional Resource Hub for Eastern and Southern Africa. We will also then have regional reference information systems in each of the regional economic commissions. So the East African Community, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, the Indian Ocean Commission, and then the Southern African Development Community, which already has a portal for transfrontier conservation areas that we are working together with them to support that. So the idea is to have these reference information systems for the specific economic commissions feeding into the resource hub, and then on into the reference information system. So that was a very brief overview of BIOPAMA and the idea with this webinar in terms of, trying to give you a brief overview of the resource hub and how you can use it and how you can add to it. I just want to quickly introduce the presenters, other than the people, well, the rest of the BIOPAMA team who are also online. We also have Lucy Baston, who is our East Africa BIOPAMA focal point. Bastian Bertsky, who will be presenting later, is the Southern African focal point. Then we have Leo Niskanen is our regional program coordinator. He unfortunately couldn't join us. He's busy traveling back from Madagascar today. And then we have Evelyn Chavero, who many of you have communicated with, who's our program coordinator. And then we also have Beryl, who is our new technical officer. She joined us in January, and she will be working very closely with the Regional Center for Mapping Resources for Development, as well as the Joint Research Center, to really establish this resource hub and these reference information systems. So just a big welcome to the team, and also a welcome to you. Thank you all very much for joining. I'm now going to hand over to Steve to give the introduction to the Joint Research Center.
Thank you, Sue, and good morning, everybody. So, yeah, my name is Steve Pidel. I'm talking to you from the Joint Research Centre in North Italy. If you were watching Andrew's video earlier, you can see that it's a nice springy, sunny day here, and we're looking forward to this series of webinars to explain progressively in more detail about the work that we do. The JRC is the in-house science service of the European Commission, which in turn is the executive branch of the European Union, which many of you will be no doubt familiar with. And here at the JRC in Italy and in other places around Europe, we're focused on science for policy in the things that affect European citizens and our global partners. And as you're probably also aware, the European Union is not active only in policies for the territory of the member states of the European Union, but also very much on the global stage. And that takes us across a whole bunch of themes. Here, if I walk out of my office, I can go and see activities on transportation, air quality, nanotechnology, sustainable development, food security, a plethora of different themes that are of relevance. And our role is to provide evidence for those policies. What are the data, what are the facts that can lead us to have good policy and to understand where policy is working and where it's not. In our group and the team that I'm very pleased to lead, we're focused on that knowledge for sustainable development, for natural resources, and in particular, protected areas and biodiversity. So in BIOPAMA, we're the technical partner with IUCN. We are building the information system, what we call the reference information system, that covers the 79 countries of the African, Caribbean, Pacific group of states, which you mentioned, the ACP is very much a part of the partnership with the European Union area. And that area is very important because it not only covers 79 countries, but over 9,000 protected areas. And in that territory, which includes obviously Eastern Africa, many of the world's important biodiversity hotspots and many of the key challenges facing conservation and the link between conservation and development. So we're trying to put data and knowledge at the heart of decision making. You know, for many years, we've seen the indicators, the key measures that show that, unfortunately and sadly, many of the things we want to protect are in decline, key habitats, key species, and so on. And increasingly, the issue of human-wildlife conflict and making the case for that link between biodiversity development, between biodiversity, nature, and communities. So, whilst we're very good at producing systems and data that show the state of biodiversity and protected areas, we really need to move, and this is what our role in BIOPAMA is to show how these things are changing, how we can influence those things. And as you'll see from the demonstrations to come, we have a lot of systems that are based on our background knowledge in Earth observation, remote sensing, GIS, things we can measure that are geographical, understanding where things are and their spatial relationships. But also, as Sue mentioned very clearly, we now have to also drill into the issues of management and governance, things we can't measure from space or remotely, where we go on the ground and we are engaging with protected area managers, with communities, and understanding the human management governance interactions around protected areas. And also what you'll see today and in the coming webinars is that rather than just laying on the table, putting in one system what we know, it's about measuring how far we are towards our objectives. What do we want to achieve in conservation? And so we are redesigning our approach to information by starting off with the objectives, targets, and policies, the indicators that then help us to measure those, and then underpinning that, of course, the data that we need. So that's a very brief introduction to our role. Of course, we are always at your disposal to answer any questions. We very much look forward to an active engagement around what we're developing, also what we're going to be building over the coming months in the region. So there's regional reference information systems that take that technology but really use the great local knowledge that exists within the BIOPAMA regions, including Eastern Africa. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew and then subsequently Bastian, and they will take you through some of the aspects of the system, and hopefully that will give you a first flavour of what we're up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Okay, now let me share my screen. This is where we get visual feedback. Right, I'm sharing. Okay, can everybody see my screen? I'm going to start by apologising. I've got 4 or 5 slides, and unfortunately, PowerPoint got the better of me, and I tried to remove one of our implementing partners in the regions, SPREP, from the PowerPoint, and excuse me, failed BISMI because it's in the master. So apologies, please ignore that. They're relevant in the Pacific, obviously not so much today. So I wanted to start out by just going through principally, as Steve briefly mentioned, why we've kind of redesigned a tool that we already had, that was already in use, and make it something much more useful and relevant, and specifically that would demonstrate this main kind of idea: how can information lead to better conservation outcomes? So I've only got, I think, 4 or 5 slides I just wanted to go through, and these are kind of the main reasons why we are looking at kind of redesigning these tools. And then I'll move on and I'll give you a brief introduction to the new version of the RIS. And Bastian is also then going to show you some specific features. But as Sue says, these are going to be supplemented each time. Hopefully you can stick with the series, not get bored too early on. And we intend to have these every 6 weeks or so. Okay, so the current tools, you may have already used the regional or the reference information system or the regional reference information systems. And those are characterized by their dashboard style. They publish and share, in many cases, the kind of the most definitive and useful reference information on protected areas and other things. But they also have this centralized update and maintenance. And what that means is that a lot of the content that goes into the previous version of the RIS came through GRC. James, could you just favour, could you? So they go through JRC, and it's not necessarily always the most efficient way of publishing and sharing information. And also there was this kind of, it was kind of a symptom of the age where people could share and publish information, and there was a great kind of stampede to publish and share information, but it wasn't necessarily clear how you would use it. And specifically linking that to conservation gain, how can we use information for better conservation outcomes? So in thinking about this for the new tools, there's really the focus on conservation targets, and I'll come on to those in a minute. And also getting the conservation community to contribute content themselves. So this is very much a bottom-up approach. It's not a kind of a top-down moderated system where there's some kind of sign-off on that. There is a sign-off process, but the idea is that the community do two things. They set their priorities, their conservation targets, and then they source and develop indicators for measuring the progress against those. So there is very much this distributed content and ownership within the new tools that's kind of built in. And I'll explain a bit about this later on. This knowledge, and this is very much kind of the strapline of BIOPAMA, is linked to conservation action. So how can you use this specific information and turn that into actionable information that can be used in the field? And this is my bugbear. Don't just publish and share just because you can. Every kind of transaction with information has a cost, and we really need to concentrate on those important data sets and those important insights. So very quickly, simple premise, conservation targets. If you achieve your target, you have a conservation outcome. This isn't rocket science. This shouldn't shock too many people, but it's a really simple message. If you achieve your target, you have outcomes. And the advantage of it being a target-based system is that a lot of the targets are already there in legislation, policy documents, in regional strategies. There are a whole set of conservation targets at a range of scales. And really, they already exist. They need to be captured methodically, and then, we need to start looking at how we measure progress. Penultimate slide, promise. So this is the simple information workflow from the policies themselves to the targets within those policies. You have indicators on those targets to measure your progress, and then on the basis of your progress, you then direct your conservation action. And my headphones have gone quiet. Can you still hear me? Okay. And the information is used to produce these indicators. I'll come back to this one, I think, later on. We can talk a bit more about that. My headphones have gone very quiet. I'm hoping this is still working. Right. So, can you see you should see a full screen now of the new reference information system. Let me check. Can you see that okay, James? My headphones have gone dead for some reason. Yeah, okay. Right, so this is the new reference information system. When you first enter, you see the regions highlighted that are relevant to the BIOPAMA project, the Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific regions. And on the left-hand side, there is this kind of box where you see explore, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff in it. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the actual user interface. I just want to concentrate on some of the concepts and just show you some examples from those. And the first one is, as I've just been talking about, policies, targets, and indicators. So in the kind of conservation world, there's this idea of looking at state pressure and response, and what they mean, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these, is three are the state, which is the status of your habitats or your species, or the thing that you're interested in. So this could be the extent of a habitat, it could be the number of species, it could be the health of your coral reef, but it's the current status of the thing that you're interested in. And underneath that will be indicators that relate to state. In pressure, that's the threat that the protected areas or other areas are threatened by. And so all of the indicators on pressure are in that tab. And then on this one that's selected at the moment, the response tab, this is where policies and targets are put. So for example, you can see these 4 levels. We have global, regional, national, and local. And when I click on each one, I get the policies that are relevant at that level. So at the global level, if I click on it, I now see this, it's expanded and it shows me some of the policies that have been entered in the system. Now, as I say, this is very much a kind of, the idea of the tool is that it's a community-based system, and that anybody can create an account, can log in, and can create content in this system. So at the bottom, I'm not going to do this today, but it says add a policy. So this has already been done by some of the people at JRC. So the things that you're looking at here have already been entered by us, and you can get some more information on them by clicking on this. And these are examples here, obviously CBD at the global level. There are regional ones that we have in here, some of them. There's the larger than elephant strategy. And the national level, there are a number of MBSAPs in the system. And so there are also local ones. So if you have a protected area management plan and you have some pretty focused targets, measurable targets, then you could put those into this tool as well. And there are some examples in here of some of those. In this case, they're in the Pacific region. So if I now click on a policy, so this is the CBD policy. I hope you can see my screen. Okay, I know there were some issues with that. Okay, good. So for CBD, again, these are targets that have been captured here at JRC, and the ones that are relevant to the project at the moment are shown. So we have 4 separate targets. There is a target 11 on protected areas, which you all know very much about. And then underneath that target, we see 4 separate lines, and these are indicators. These are things that you can use to measure your progress against those targets. And just as with policies, you have the ability for adding in new targets and adding in new indicators. So when you're at this level, you can then have a look at any of these targets. And when I click on an individual indicator, I'm going to zoom in a minute because I know that sometimes this is a bit small text. But I'm now looking at what we call an indicator card, and this is the kind of the atomic level of the system. Really, it's just the system is a way of managing biodiversity indicators. So at this particular for this particular indicator, I see some information about the context. So it's a global policy, it's CBD, it's target 11, and the indicator is terrestrial protected area coverage for the pan-ACP, and it has a source in here. Underneath that kind of title, you see 4 tabs, and these are the levels that the information and the analysis has been calculated at. So in this case here, for example, this is being calculated at the global level. In this case, the data comes from another JRC project called the Digital Observatory for Protected Areas, and they calculate statistics for protected areas across the world. And this is one example where we're using data from another provider. So looking underneath, I can see I have a chart with lots of bars, and then on the map I have a set of countries which are coloured in. The 2 are linked, so if I move, so this is what this is showing is the terrestrial protected area coverage, and on the left hand side is the percentage, and on the bottom are the countries, and it will show you the percentage when you hover over them. It will also show you on the map as well. And if you want to see, click a country on the map, then you can see that in the chart as well. Now, one of the things that we've done is we've used a specific mapping technology that's really fast and enables you to change how you view your data very quickly on the map. So, for example, here I'm looking at a whole set of different countries who have implemented CBD, and some have got some success, and some have already met the target, and you can very rapidly just filter. So if I move this slider up, I'm now looking at those probably above, I don't know, now 30% and up. and my map has changed to reflect that. So I can see that these are the countries that have already got over 30% protection, and if I wanted to see all of the countries which haven't met their CBD targets, then I can just change my slider accordingly. Underneath the chart, we have some information here. I'll just zoom in so you can read it. This is the metadata. There's some more detailed information on the help tab, which I won't show you, but this basically gives you a quick summary of that particular indicator and the source and what it can be used for, and we'll link to a more detailed description if that's available. I'm conscious that I've already rambled for at least 10 minutes, so I'll speed up a bit. Okay, so as I say, these tabs across the top here, they represent the level that the analysis was done at. So for this indicator, we have data at the global level. And there are other indicators where the data is at different levels. So for example, if I pick this one underneath here, this is slightly different. This is the terrestrial protected area coverage, but this is a time series. So let's go to Tanzania and have a look at Tanzania. This is a time series. So this is showing you the change in terrestrial protected area for Tanzania over time. And just to show you how we can use this filtering in a useful way, if I now have move my slider over to the left, I can change the date range on the chart, and I can see which protected areas were designated within which years. And as I move that slider, you can see on the right hand side my protected areas change accordingly. And that's potentially very useful when you have, when you're showing data on the map that has a particular attribute of interest and you want to focus in on those areas where your conservation isn't working so well, or whatever it is, then this is quite a powerful way of doing that. So that's another indicator, and I want to show you maybe two more if I have time. How am I doing for time, Sue? Am I over or under or?
Hi, Andrew. Yeah, 5 more minutes.
5 more. Okay, good. Right. So I've shown you some of the indicators for CBD. Excuse me. We can bring in indicator information from a whole range of sources as well. One of the other ones was we did an analysis here on threats to or deforestation in protected areas using a data set called the Global Forest Watch. And excuse me. So what this is doing here, I've now changed, so I'm looking at a different indicator, and this is showing me the deforestation both within, which is the blue line on this chart here, and outside the protected area network in Tanzania over time. And it's really just to show you two things. That firstly, the information on the chart can be as complicated as you want. You can show any number of variables, but also to show you in the map, you may have noticed this pink color. That is an external service that's coming from somebody else. That's Global Forest Watch have produced this layer of deforestation between 2001 and 2016. And so that's coming directly from an outside provider. And that's very much one of the main drivers for this tool, is that we can link in both spatial data within the map from other providers, and we can also have the normal data from external providers as well. I think I'm going to stop there in terms of indicators. There was one other one I was going to show. I don't remember which one it was. Yeah. And if you don't want to go through the hierarchy to look at the indicators, then there's just a list. So this is just a flat list of all of the indicators that are currently available in the system. I want to show you one more thing in the tool. This is the main kind of map-based interface, but there are also summary pages for countries, for regions, and for individual protected areas that present the information from that that angle. So this is very much focused on showing information on individual indicators. But if you want to have a look at a particular protected area and all of the indicator information, then you could go and have a look at that protected area page. And that's probably something we'll look at next time. One last thing I want to show you in here is, let's turn off this color. Built into this interface, into the new RIS, we have something called the OpenStreetMap editor. And the OpenStreetMap editor is, let me just refresh, I'll go back in. The OpenStreetMap editor is something that there's a global open source data set which is capturing all mainly human-centric features, not always, but in many cases human-centric features on a map. And anybody can go in and they can create new features within that. And then within this new RIS, there is this OpenStreetMap editor. So I can have a look at now. I've turned on some imagery and I can see the imagery, and then the white lines that are on here is the information that's coming from OpenStreetMap. And you can see that in some cases it's incredibly detailed. But it may not necessarily have all the features that are relevant to conservation within the map. And don't forget that all of these features can actually be, excuse me, can actually be used in analyses as well. And this is something that we're going to be building in later on. But I can directly go in now into this area in my OpenStreetMap editor. And for any area, it will show me all of the features that already exist in here. So these are my features that already exist near Gombe. And if I want to create some new features, so for example, I might see some animal tracks, or I might see some river features, or some new roads in like logging tracks that are going into forests. If they're not captured, I can capture those in here, and then they're available for the rest of the community. So I'm just, yeah. Oh, sure. Okay, I'll turn off my webcam. Yeah, hang on. Right, turn it off. I didn't know it's still turned on. Sorry. Right, I'm gonna stop there because I think that's just a very quick look-see at the new RIS, and then I want to just have two last slides which kind of make some of this stuff a bit more concrete. Two slides, yeah. So the first one is very much looking at how can we get this content, because so many of these targets, especially MBSAPs, have got targets in there and have got some kind of starter ideas for indicators, but we really do need to get the content in. So I just want to quickly go through some of the potential sources within Eastern and Southern Africa so that's at the global level. So there are a number of organisations. At the regional analyses, there's these regional resource hubs, which could be a focus for these indicators for identifying them. There's the biodiversity indicators partnerships, TFCAs. There is another initiative from JRC called eStation, which you may be familiar with as well. So that's additional content at the regional level. At the national scale, these indicators could come from the reference hubs. They could come from BIP again. And then at the local scale, there are management effectiveness assessments and specific case studies. And last slide, this is how I think the coordination of the activities happens. So I've shown you the tool that collectively we can use to capture targets, policies, targets, indicators, and then how that is actually becomes a physical thing. And I think this is the kind of the workflow. So it would be something like the regional resource hubs prioritize their targets. So they have a set of targets across policy documents, and then they can prioritize those. The targets are captured in the RIS, so then they become shared by the community. Everybody has a common understanding of what they're trying to achieve. Then suitable indicators are identified. So how are we going to measure our progress? And then those analyses are either done internally, whether it's at RCMRD or whether it's outsourced to somebody else. and then the indicators are then published into the RIS, and then that allows us to measure the progress and look at how we can look at conservation action accordingly. And then at the end of it all, when everything is successful, we can communicate that back to the community. So I'm going to stop there and hand back over to Sue. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That was great. Yeah, anyone, if you do want to ask questions, you can either put them in the group chat, or we will have Q&A after Bastian's presentation. I'm going to hand over to Bastian now.
Yes, hello everyone. I hope you can see me and hear me. My name is Bastian. I'm also based here in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And I'm working specifically on terrestrial protected areas, and I'm the focal point for Southern Africa, as Sue was explaining earlier. I will follow up directly on Andrew's presentation and keep it really simple today and just look at how one can contribute some content to the reference information system, some very simple steps today. For example, how to add a policy, how to add a target, and also how to add some documents to the various pages that Andrew mentioned for regions, countries, and protected areas. So let me share my screen with you. Can you see that?
Not yet. Oh, yes, we can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, so we are back on the RIS, and I will start by just showing you how to add a policy reference and how to add a target under a particular policy. And let me first zoom in on Southern Eastern Africa, the region we're interested in here today. And then I can further zoom into part of that region. Let's say, I go to Eastern Africa here, and I look at the various national policies that are already in the system. So we have here the national biodiversity strategies and action plans for Eritrea and Somalia, but we don't have one for Ethiopia yet, for example. And one thing we can do very easily is we can go to the CBD website and we can get the latest NB sub for Ethiopia from that website. If you go to the CBD website, you find all the latest NB subs for countries. You can go through to the Ethiopia one, and you can actually open the document. And within that document, there will be some national targets for Ethiopia relating to the CBD, and there are IT targets, the global IT targets. Now, for example, for Ethiopia, I can find target 7 here, which is about protected areas and how much of the country's area is supposed to be protected by 2020. They want to increase this from 14% to 20%. So how do I add those things in the system now? Here, back in the RIS, I can first just add a policy. I need to log in to do that. And once I'm in here, I can again, in the RIS, go to the national page, add a policy, and say Ethiopia and BSAP, and then, if necessary, add a description, add a source for where this policy comes from, add an existing source and a new source. In this case, I'm using the Convention on Biological Diversity as a source. So I can, in the system, link this policy to the CBD as a policy framework. And then, if necessary, I can upload an image which is representative of the policy. It could be an image of biodiversity or forests in the country or a protected area. And then I need to select the countries to which this policy applies. In this case, I go into the country selection panel and select Ethiopia. And then I can also add a URL linking to the NB sub on the web. And normally, if you would do that, you would submit it as pending approval, and then a regional moderator would approve this submission. In my case, I can immediately publish this now. And when I now zoom in to the region again, I should see this very soon popping up in the system. Let's just quickly go. Yeah, there it is already. Wait, we go in here again. So there we have Ethiopia now listed with an NB sub. And if I wanted to add a target under this, the protected area target for this policy, again, the system will take me to a dialog where I can include a title for the target. I can go onto the website of the CBD and I can copy the actual text of the target. I can put it in here. I can put again a link so that people can find this also on the web. And I'm asked to actually specify the target date. In this case, we will use the end of 2020 because, you know, in the target it says by 2020, the area coverage of ecologically representative and effectively managed protected areas in Ethiopia is increased from 14 to 20%. So I will go in here and select the end of 2020 as a target date. One can also assign priorities to targets. In this case, I'll just leave that for the moment. And I publish again this target. And there it pops up in the system. And then in the next step, one could add an indicator. So somebody in Ethiopia who has data on the protected area coverage for Ethiopia could add an indicator referring to this target and showing progress over time. We will not do that today. It's a bit more complex to add the indicator data, but that's something we will show in a subsequent webinar. And as Andrew has shown it, we have already done this using a global data set from the Digital Observatory for Protected Areas, where you can look at protected area coverage across countries from a global data set, which may or may not be exactly reflecting the situation in the country. That's why you may want to add actually a national country data set for this target. So that was part one of my quick demonstration. So we have added a policy, the Ethiopian NB sub, and within that policy, we have added a target. And then another webinar, we will be looking at how to add indicators for specific targets. Now, another thing I want to show you today is how we can add actually some documents to the system. So there are various global platforms with protected area information, biodiversity information, but quite often, I mean, you want to have it in one system, you want to have some of the key documents accessible. And for us, one of the key documents we would definitely want to have accessible for as many protected areas as possible is the current management plan. Let's take the example of Kruger National Park in South Africa. I can look for that protected area here easily with this search window, and the system takes me to Kruger National Park. And I can look at the information we have in the system for Kruger at the moment, and I see there is a management plan already recorded, but from 2008, which may or may not be the latest management plan. If you are working in a protected area, if you're working in an agency, a ministry, in a country, you may have a more recent document. I found one on the internet, which is the Kruger National Park Management Plan for 2018 to 2028. And I have taken this document, downloaded it, and now I can actually add it to our system. I will go to the page of this protected area, and I will click on adding another management plan. And then this system allows me to add the title for this management plan, if necessary, add an abstract, and I can choose a file from my system, the Kruger Approved Management Plan for 2018-2028. I can upload this document. It takes a second because it's a fairly big file. And then I can say save. And when I go back to the system, to the same page where we were before and refresh that page, we should see the new management plan now here on top of the one that was previously recorded there. And we have it in the system, and somebody in the future can easily find this management plan and review the objectives of the management plan, the strategy for management, management issues, and so on. So it loads the plan in the system. Another example is at the national level, where we can go to the level of South Africa, and we have some basic summary information on the country, the protected area coverage in the country. But now I want to show you how to upload a document here. In this case, an assessment of management effectiveness for all the South African protected areas. Here we have in the country page a tab called Documents, where you can upload national assessments, strategies, or policies. And in my case here, I will want to add a document, which again, I found on the internet, but it may be something that you have been involved with, that your agency, your ministry has been producing. In this case, it's a management effectiveness assessment for South African protected areas. I've downloaded the document to my system. I go back into the upload document for South Africa and say add the document. Now I can give this a title. Which I can also change later if necessary. I can add some text again, an abstract or some description. I can choose the file from my system. If necessary, I can add a contact person. So if you are the one in the ministry or in the agency who has helped preparing this document, who is uploading this, you can add your contact details, and I can upload the system, add the document into the system. And any other user can then find this document here for South Africa as a key document about the management effectiveness of the country's protected areas. And the same also applies at the regional level. So if I then go to the region of Eastern and Southern Africa, for example, there's a regional page, which is a similar structure and has a list of countries in the region, various indicators, which we will look at another time. But then again, you can simply upload documents. And in this case, I want to show you, for example, that the SADC TFCA network, Transfrontier Conservation Areas Network, has recently adopted a monitoring and evaluation framework, which applies to all the SADC TFCAs. And this document, again, is very important for everybody working on these transfrontier conservation areas. Includes a list of important indicators that are supposed to be used to measure progress in these TFCAs. And I've downloaded this document, and I now can go back to the RIS, and I can add this document in the RIS so that it's easily available to other users. Let me just demonstrate that once again. Very easy. Just upload the document, takes a second. If necessary, add the contact person, which could be the person, for example, that has developed this document or is the focal point in the SADC TFCA network. You upload the document, and within a second, it's available to all the users, and that can be found on the system here for the region Southern Eastern Africa. I will stop here for now so that we have plenty of time for discussion, but I think I hope this demonstration has given you a first quick idea of how simple it is to add some content, especially documents, but also policies and targets to the system. And we will rely, of course, on the support in the regions to help with this kind of work. We have started some of this, but it's possible for us to upload the management plans for 9,000 protected areas in the ACP regions. And that's where some of these regional resource hubs and regional observatories will come in, and will hopefully be able to facilitate with IUCN and IUCN's networks to contribute content to the system. I will hand back to Sue now. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Bastian. Thanks. We've had a couple of questions. So I don't know if you've all been following the group chat. If you want to catch up on how to vet some of the OpenStreetMap, there is a discussion going on there with Bazeng from BirdLife and the JRC contacts. But are there any other questions that anyone would like to ask? So the idea, and we hope that we've achieved that objective, was to show you how you can use the reference information system. So how you can look at indicators, targets over time, different threats to protected areas, and then also how to load documents. So you can load any of the documents you've worked on and reference yourself as the contact point. You can link to databases that you have, and you're more than welcome to chat to the JRC contacts if you would like more details on how to link all of that. But anyone have any questions regarding the system, how to use it? Any questions? Bazeng, was your question answered in terms of the vetting?
Yes, it was.
Super. I think it is an important question in terms of understanding, if people are loading data, how it all gets vetted. You saw how Bastian added that you would have pending approval for documents loaded onto the system in terms of the actual RIS, but yeah, OpenStreetMap is obviously a different system.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, I think a key fundamental principle here is to get data out of individual silos. One of the great things about OpenStreetMap is it's the same data but used in many, many different applications. So it can be very basic, like just seeing what is the accessibility of a protected area, and what are the roads and tracks access within a protected area. What are the buildings? What is the infrastructure? What are the natural features? And the same with the management plans. They don't just sit in a repository which is just about that individual protected area. We can start to look at things at regional level, national level. How many protected areas have a management plan in a given area? So we really are trying to build that bridge between local and global, and doing those analyses and getting knowledge out of all of this information that's out there but hasn't really been put together in one place in the right way until now.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Just to add to that, I think it's a very, very impressive feature in terms of monitoring what is happening around these special areas. And also from an IUCN point of view, where we do red listing of species and ecosystems or habitats, it's sort of like identifying most of the pressures that are happening around this area. So it's very impressive. Well done.
Thanks, Vizeng. And I know I have been chatting to Karaoke as well in terms of some of the databases that BirdLife generally has. So we'll definitely be connecting and see how we can showcase more of that, the work that you're all doing. Any other questions? If you don't want to speak on the webinar, you're welcome to type it into the chat as well. And yeah, even if general BIOPAMA questions or otherwise specifically related to the reference information system. And just as a follow-up as well, our second webinar will be on the 13th of March at the same time. And that particular webinar is going to be on data use and analysis. So where data has already been collected, but how do you now do something meaningful with it? So how do you use data that you already have? So I see we have a comment from Lucy Waringa: great improvement on the interface and excellent value addition that makes the use cases clear, compelling, and actionable. Thank you, Lucy. Oh, I'm thanking you on behalf of JRC because they did all the work. Also, I'm going to put in to the chat, if you can all please join our Yammer network. We have a BIOPAMA Yammer network where we share a lot of resources, publications, networking events, webinars. So please feel free to join that network, and yeah, we can also keep in touch through that. Let's just put it into the system. Lucy has for
I'll just add very quickly that the person who's done the hard work with all of the development, James Davies, is on the call, and so I'll pass on those nice comments from Lucy and others. I'll pass those on to James because he's worked very hard and done a great job.
Yes, thank you, James. Yeah, I think between the two of you, excellent job. Lucy has a question there. For data collected at project level, who authorizes on behalf of the country? Isn't NGO data valid enough for this platform? Steve, see you nodding there.
Yeah, just to say, well, this is exactly why we need not just a system that's running here at the JRC. This is why we need a regional resource hub and regional reference information systems where the governance of these data issues can be managed at the local level. Every region is slightly different, but I think as we go forward with building a regional resource hub for East and Southern Africa, we do need to think very carefully about authorization for publication, who can do what. What you've seen today is a secure framework that allows you to do that. You have to log in, you have to have certain rights to do things in the system. It's not a free-for-all. On the one hand, we saw OpenStreetMap where anybody can go in and do stuff, and then over time it continually gets improved. Here we're talking about something much more structured, and I think one of the key things to get sorted out very early in the new resource hub for the region is the respective roles. But we do really want active engagement by national, local, regional authorities to build those targets and to share those data.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions? Just also, anyone who has any other ideas of webinars that you'd like us to host in terms of queries that you may have, as we have mentioned, we will be building on the webinars in terms of what you can do on the reference information system and get in more detailed as we go along. And we will be doing webinars also on management effectiveness and governance and assessment tools on the action component. But please, if you have any ideas, please also email those through and we'll try and accommodate as and when we can. If there are no more questions, 1 more minute, anyone pressing questions? I will be, as mentioned, this has been recorded and we'll upload it onto the BIOPAMA website and also onto the Yammer page. So if you'd like to share it with any colleagues, please feel free to do that. If there are no more questions, then just thank you very much for all of you who participated. Really appreciate you taking the time and busy schedules to join us. And thank you very much to the JRC team for all your hard work in putting the RIS together and preparing all the presentations for today. And thank you, everyone for joining, all the presenters. And have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.